I'm going to pull up Facebook group here. All right, welcome everybody, welcome. Candace Summers here, and I have a very special guest with me. I have Cathy Lumsden, who lives in Ottawa, Ontario. Cathy is a psychotherapist, a business coach, an author, an international speaker. She has over 30 years experience of helping people. She runs her own private practice in psychology and provides life and business coaching at Rhapsody Strategies. Welcome, Cathy. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Kenda. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I'm my pleasure. You live in Ottawa. I miss Ottawa. I was born and raised there. How is everything with this world situation right now? How's everything in Ottawa?
Ottawa, we're doing really well. We're now just opening, patios on, and we're doing different slow progress. I think we're minimal in Ottawa right now. So people have been really good to practice what we've been, taught or told.
Yeah. So are you allowed to see people person to person yet, Cathy, or is that not allowed yet?
It is. It just was allowed by the government, but my college, the registered psychotherapists, are recommending we don't.
Oh, is that right?
Still, because we're in a fairly small room, and we're either going to have to wear a mask or a shield, and it's going to be really weird and awkward. And most of my clients actually love online because you're closer.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. I have the similar but opposite. A lot of mine don't like the online. I did a couple of sessions, I guess in March, and because school was out and the kids were home, the kids had to go, or the parents went out into their car because that was the only place they could go to get away from everybody. Right. So they're out there with their car on to keep the heat running, and then because they're hypnotized, their eyes are closed, the car would stop, which would make it cold. Their Bluetooth would die, and I'm just kind of like, oh my God, this is a mess. This is a mess. So I'm on the Illinois-Iowa border, and Illinois is interesting. They are way behind. I think they're just allowing outdoor patios. You can't have in like restaurants. You can't go into a restaurant or anything. But in Iowa, which is literally a jump over the bridge, restaurants are working at not 100% capacity, 50% capacity. So it's so different, state to state. Is it like that with you guys, province to province? Is every province different?
It is, yes.
It is,
absolutely. Yeah, because Quebec and Ontario, and Ottawa's in Ontario, have the highest number out east, especially the island, PEI. They just close, no one can come, right? Like kind of like New Zealand, right? They did so well until unfortunately somebody went to visit New Zealand. So that's unfortunate with it.
Yeah, it's strange times right now. It's strange times, but I was saying to I had a client yesterday, and I said the world seems a little bit more peaceful now. Do you find the same? Like the energy seems to be more at peace?
It is, even though there's a lot of pain. I always believe things happen for a reason and from a higher source. And so for whatever reason, the peace, the changes that are needed, that are necessary, I guess are the silver lining. But there's a lot of pain out there now, huge amount of pain.
A lot of people don't even realize, I mean, like, being such an empath, I don't like to think about all the lives that have been lost, the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost, and just those people, how their loved ones who are still on earth are going to contend with the loss of somebody that, it's been in their life forever. I can't even wrap my head around that. Have you seen clients like that, Cathy, or will you be seeing clients like that?
I haven't had any, which is good, I guess, is that they haven't lost anyone to death.
Right.
They've definitely had, you know, haven't been able to see their parents in extended care homes. And I'll see people standing outside waving at their parents, and on my heart, I just start to cry.
Oh,
It's like, oh, my heart's breaking.
so
And
sad.
yes, I think, we're going to have a mental health crisis, and we already are. It's going to be getting worse. So I think I will see people who have
Yeah.
lost. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna become a very necessary thing. Um, so let's jump in here. What you specialize, you're a psychotherapist, but so is it fair for me to say that you specialize in EMDR?
I would say I've been doing it, trained in it probably 20 years ago. And, I've been in practice for over 35 years. And, I would do the normal sort of talk therapy of different kinds, which is effective. However, once I was trained in EMDR and brain spotting, which is an offshoot of EMDR, I just like, wow, this is amazing. I did it for my own stuff. We all have stuff.
Okay.
I did it for my own stuff as well. So I would know what clients are experiencing. Even in our training, we had to do it.
Right.
We had to practice on ourselves, and then I went and did my own stuff. And so I'm finding that it is getting where we need to go, that talk therapy can't always get to, or can, but it might take a few years.
Because is it fair to say that a lot of stuff happens subconsciously, that, our conscious awareness, we're not aware of it? So EMDR, kind of similar to hypnosis, you're going for the underlying reasons that consciously people aren't aware of things that are affecting them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The way I like to describe it is, I'm a visual person, and imagine this is your brain. And here is like the thinking part of your brain, the frontal cortex. And deep down in the middle of your brain, it's almost like it's a little computer that has stored every single memory that you've ever had in the middle of your brain. And that's connected to the part of our brain that goes into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is the fourth one. And we have absolutely no control over those things. And so EMDR gets at shifting those experiences that have a lot of emotional intensity that we don't even know are there sometimes. Right? Just like hypnosis is, you're going to be getting at the unconscious pieces. So we store these experiences in our minds, and our brain has the capacity to do processing very, very well. However, there's certain experiences, traumas, little t trauma, big T traumas, loss, that are almost frozen in the middle of our brain. Like they're frozen. And so they're not processed. The brain doesn't process them the way they need to be processed. So they're like little outliers, and they have huge emotional intensity. So EMDR reprocesses and desensitizes those experiences, which then don't trigger that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response.
So could I, let's say I've lost my pet, and I'm crushed. I'm absolutely crushed. And 3, 4, 5 months go by, and I'm not getting any better, Cathy. I'm still beside myself. I'm not able to function. I'm bursting out into tears all the time. Could there be more than the loss of my pet that's making me so emotional?
Yes, I would say there is, and we just don't know consciously what it is. So every single loss, after the loss of your dear animal, every single loss in your whole life, from your first heartbreak, to a friend rejecting you, to other losses and traumas in our lives. When we lose somebody and an animal so close and near and dear to us, guaranteed they're all going to be activated. And so, our emotional reaction, and rightfully so, in no way am I minimizing it. After some people a year later, like we talked about, are still crying almost every day.
Yeah.
Definitely, these old things are being re-triggered.
So even though I might think to myself, you know what, Cathy, no, I'm fine. Yeah, my mom and dad are no longer here. I lost my sister, but I'm at peace with all that. Those things don't bother me. So even though consciously I can say those things, it may not be the truth, though, right?
It may not be the truth, and it may not be those losses either that have a huge emotional intensity, right? Yeah, they're probably building it. For example, let's say you lost a goldfish when you were 5. First experience ever with death, or a pet. What's a pet, I guess. And it's just stored there. And then you have, the loss of your mom, your dad, a sister, as you mentioned. It's layers and layers and layers being put on, and we push it down, and that's where we like to store it, so we don't have to feel it. We don't have to deal with it. And you can have a lot of peace as well with the fact of the loss of your parents, for example. You still can have peace. You still might have some emotional triggers.
That's really interesting. And it's something that I imagine a lot of people, I mean, obviously when you're grieving a loss, you're not analyzing yourself, thinking every day, okay, why am I so upset? Why is today worse than yesterday? You're not aware of your emotions because you're just so focused on your sadness. So as a specialist, you're able to look at an individual, hear their story, and then take them back and kind of refire those neurons that are misfiring right now, right?
Right. And the beauty, though, of EMDR is you don't always have to be consciously aware of those experiences that are causing you pain.
Which we may not be, right?
No. And so some people have a fear, excuse me, of going for counseling because they say, oh, I don't want to open up that Pandora box. Well, you may open it and you may not even realize you're opening it. You could be feeling the loss of your pet. However, at the same time, you're reprocessing all the other losses in your whole life
that you never had a chance to process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or you thought you had. So what does EMDR stand for?
It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
It's a big handle.
So it is. So the eye movements, so your eyes are connected to your optic nerve, and then down it goes into the middle of your brain. So the bilateral stimulation of your eyes, the back and forth movement of your eyes in a set procedure allows you to do that reprocessing and desensitizing of those experiences.
Do people have to, so if a client comes to your office or you're working virtually, do you need to know their whole story?
I need to know their history, not in every detail. I will ask specific, what are some of the losses or traumas, little traumas, big T traumas that you've had, just so I know that if they do become conscious of it, I'm aware of it. But it's I don't need to know every single thing.
Okay.
No.
And that's a wonderful thing too, because I find a lot of people going for counseling, and especially now when you can't be in the office, it's really hard to get rapport, right? At least when you're in an office, you can meet a person, and you have a chance for them to like and trust you and build up that foundation. but it's more difficult online to have that rapport with somebody. So in essence, it's harder for them to just throw everything out there as well, right? Like that trust factor.
Well, I would have thought that before I was doing virtual. I mean, even before COVID, I was doing virtual people overseas, for example. And I would have thought that it had to be person to person. I mean, after so many years. However, clients are now feeling very safe in their home, right? And so coming into a new person's office, it can still be uncomfortable for quite a while. So there's really not a lot of difference. And I'm actually closer to them
I like that. I
physically.
like that. And the safety features there too, right? Like you're not worrying about, you know, any kind of diseases or anything like that. It's all very, very safe.
Yeah.
Um, so I know this is a big question, but 101, how does EMDR work?
Well, imagine that all those experiences of loss are like little capsules in your brain. And a few of them, experiences you've had, decide not to get processed normally, right? So they're the so-called outliers, they're frozen. And so the bilateral stimulation, I know it sounds really simple, tons and tons of research on it, which is good, over 20, 25 years now. So the actual eye movements help with the reprocessing of those old memories. And it can be more than eye movements. People can use like tactile. Like in my office, I would have bilateral stimulation of these little sensors. It's kind of like two little purring kittens.
Nice.
The actual eye movements was the first use of EMDR and was researched extensively. So I know it sounds kind of simple and weird, but it's very amazing. And you have to experience it to see.
To see. I told you briefly, I have experienced it, and this was many, many years ago in Ottawa. I didn't know it as EMDR, which is interesting because I'm thinking back now and I'm wondering, like, how did I find this lady and why did I go to her? Like, I know why I went to her, but it was just, I don't think she sold it as EMD. I don't know, Cathy. It's but I can just remember sitting in her office, and she brought like a black screen up, and it was probably about 6 feet away from me, and then these lights just started going back and forth, like you said, the bilateral stimulation. And I've shared an exercise with people on the Facebook group about just taking a water bottle and passing it back and forth across their body, and that can it's a form of bilateral stimulation and get them out of an unresourceful state. But I just remember doing this process with her, and I think I may have only gone just the one time. And when I thought about that situation that was horrific for me, I could think about it, but the sting was gone. The rawness of the situation, of my memory of the situation, wasn't there anymore. So it was very interesting and impressive about how it could change that quickly.
Oh, I know. And everybody's different too, right? It's same as grief, the time of grief, the duration. With people coming for EMDR or brain spotting, they can be like you. They can have that one session and that memory is shifted enough that they can handle it, right? Research shows, I think it was 6 to 8 on average, that people would have 6 to 8 sessions on average. Yeah.
And so you're testing them at each appointment, and could I be upset about exhibit A, and then when I come in to see you next appointment, exhibit A doesn't bother me anymore, but now this is bothering me, something that didn't bother me before?
Absolutely, yes.
So
Yeah.
then we'll do a session on exhibit B, so to speak.
Yes, for sure. And it may or may not be linked together.
Interesting.
What I find, and one of my books discusses this, is we develop our perceptions of the world and ourselves and other people basically between the ages of 0 and 10, 11-ish, right? And obviously there's a multi positive, negative, neutral, doesn't matter sort of experiences. And we as little people don't have an adult brain. So we create these limiting beliefs about ourselves. For example, one of them is feeling alone. So if you are somebody who have that belief and intense feelings with it, if you have a loss in your life, that's just going to go wow, because it's already there, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. So there's a lot of, to be a very busy lady. There's going to be a lot of people reaching out for help.
There is, and here in Canada, we have some free right now sessions for people to help them get through this, which is really helpful.
Very nice. Not in the U.S., right?
Yeah, I don't know about the U.S. Yeah.
So the government is offering that to people that are in stress type things, certain counselors they can go see.
Yeah, we have a telehelp line that is providing it.
That's beautiful. So what kind of things are you seeing right now?
A lot of anxiety. And it's not necessarily anxiety of, am I going to get COVID? Some people, obviously. It's also the anxiety of, if I get it and I spread it to somebody else, I don't want to hurt anybody else. There's the anxiety of the uncertainty, like, what's the world going to be like, right? Am I going to have a job? Am I going to have a house in a few months? So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety and fear, and rightfully so, right? However, it's so easy to get, with all the media, to get wrapped up in it. And it doesn't do us, yes, we need to be informed, but it doesn't do us any justice watching it a lot.
No. And now that we're like, we can get out and about now. We're not locked in. But I know myself, for the longest time, you get up in the morning, you turn the news on. And even though I tried to pull myself away from it, and I knew it wasn't healthy to sit there and watch it all day long, it was kind of like that train wreck, Cathy, that, you just, you were afraid to not see what was coming up next because, whoa, you need that little piece of information that might save your life or somebody else's life. And it just got to be so addictive watching it. And I knew better, but it's like, you got to pull yourself away from it because it's just not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing, just because if I don't say it now, it'll slip my mind, is EMDR and brain spotting can also work on the positive feelings and memories and experiences we've had. Yeah. So, for example, the loss of a pet. You also have wonderful, beautiful memories, right? Sure. And they can be bittersweet, obviously. However, you can strengthen those as well. Sometimes it's harder to strengthen them when you're in intense grief, because you can't get connected to that feeling. But I'm sure there's lots of, pets just bring us, like, I wrote a list, when I was thinking about this. I've been through many losses in my life, and pets included. And, don't take me wrong, but sometimes losing a pet is worse because they give you unconditional love. They are that freshness of being in the moment, right? They don't judge, right? They're just there and feel safe with you, and you feel safe with them. You can't always get that with people. Right?
Cathy, you're like spot on as to why I formed this group. And it happened through things that have happened to me through my life. I tragically lost my sister and brother-in-law in an accident 25 years ago. And I sought help. I went to group sessions for bereavement. And I knew I needed more because I just wasn't, I was that person that after a year was still crying at the drop of a hat and not able to function well. My marriage ended up being dissolved because of my grief over my sister. But I remember going in Carlton Place, there was a group there, and I thought, well, I'm going to go immerse myself into another group session because maybe that'll help me. And like groups are all individual, right? And sometimes there's good groups and sometimes there's bad groups. And I went to this one at the Carlton Place Hospital. And of course, you go around the circle and you tell your story. And so when I told them about my loss of my sister and my brother-in-law, I was made to feel very my loss was very unimportant compared to the people who had lost a child or the people who had been married 30 years and they've just lost their spouse. So at that point, I saw the importance of being put into groups of similarity. So I should never have been in a group with a husband and wife loss or with a child loss. I needed to be with siblings. And I was made feel like I can remember leaving there thinking that my loss was not important and it didn't matter, and it crushed me. And that that happened so long ago, and it brought me forward to forming this group, where the way I like to look at it, Cathy, is every loss is important. And it doesn't matter if it was that baby that, was stillborn, or your grandfather that you knew forever, your husband. If your heart is broken, all losses are important. But in particular, my heart goes out to this one because I know there's a need, and pet loss is one of those things, kind of like when I lost my sister, that people just, they don't necessarily respect it the way they should.
I agree. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, very well said.
It's
the pain is excruciating, right?
Yeah. And as a society, don't you find that we're grief illiterate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we had talked about how guilt sneaks in there with grief, right? And guilt of, how come my brother's got over his loss of his pet, and and I'm not? What's wrong with me, right? Why am I not doing it?
What about guilt where if I'd taken my pet to a different vet, maybe a different vet would have been able to do something different?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That, that's the regret part, right? Of grieving. It's, and our logical brain may know darn well that, for example, my cat had cancer and it wasn't going to do, but we're going to go there. Our mind's going to take us down that slippery road. Yeah.
We're gonna play that game that if you maybe had looked a little bit harder on the internet, you may have found that one vet, but it's like you did the best that you could with what you knew at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Could have known different. You may have made different decisions, or maybe you wouldn't have, but guilt is a tough emotion to overcome.
Yeah. And some people's guilt goes into shame. Shame is, I'm bad, right? So guilt has its place in the sense it may help us choose to do something different. Not necessarily talking about pets right now, but in general, right?
Yeah.
But shame is that deep, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. And grief can take us to shame sometimes too.
Interesting. Yeah, there's just such a ball of emotions, right? What would you say, Cathy, to the individual that the pain is so bad and they don't have a lot of support. So they're numbing it with substances,
Yeah.
having a few drinks, maybe taking recreational drugs. They don't want to feel those feelings. They're stuffing them. And for, after 3 drinks, that pain doesn't hurt as much. After they take this prescription or recreational narcotic or whatever, it doesn't, the sting's not there. What advice do you have to people who are looking at loss and dealing with it in that way?
Yeah, I mean, it can become an issue. I mean, I like my glass of wine, right? However, it's the numbing of the feelings, and often, loss set aside. With anybody who's a substance abuse, there's a lot of anxiety often underneath it, and that's what's trying to, like, we don't want to go to, or anxiety or fear or shame or whatever. And so it's easier to do it that way, and society promotes it, right?
And it does. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. So what would your advice be to somebody like that? Would your services benefit somebody that knows that they're numbing the emotions through, other means rather than just ripping that Band-Aid off and letting it bleed?
Yeah, it's definitely, I would seek help for sure. And it doesn't have to be ripping the Band-Aid off either. Like, if I'm seeing somebody who's abusing some substance, I'm not going to tell them to stop. I'm going to help them with their anxiety. I'm going to help them with the shame or the intense grief, which then allows them, and then we could talk about maybe slowing down or shifting it a bit, and then eventually more and more. I'm not an expert in substance abuse by any means. However, EMDR and brain spotting definitely can be used.
Can help in that area. And you're right, like we all know our own selves. Like there's a difference between having like a glass of wine at night and having like 5 glasses of wine, so that you don't have to feel that pain, right. and then doing it, repeating it, rinsing and repeating it every night type thing. Because in essence, you're just delaying the inevitable, right? At some point, you're going to have to feel those emotions.
Yeah, they'll sneak up or they'll come out physically. Right. That's the other issue. You may all of a sudden have a really sore back, or a really, neck pain all the time, and you don't have a clue why. Yeah, because our minds and our bodies are directly connected.
Yeah. You see people that come into you with physical ailments that after they have the EMD treatments, that the physical ailments all of a sudden they're not there anymore, or that they're less?
Yes, for sure. I have. There's one client I'm thinking of in particular. She had anxiety as well, but it was coming out in a lot of physical pain. And it definitely helped. She was able to reduce her pain medication. Yeah.
Interesting. It's that mind-body connection, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That mind-body connection. So we talked about how many treatments an individual needs. I have another individual that asked if EMDR was for everyone experiencing grief. While you answer that, I'm just going to look on and see if we've got any more questions. I'll let you answer that question now.
Personally, I would say yes. I don't know if all my colleagues in psychology would agree. And the sooner the better, to a certain extent, because those experiences and memories that are, like I said, outliers that are kind of frozen and aren't processed by your brain, the sooner you start, the better. Like, for example, motor vehicle accidents. People who specialize in that in EMDR will say, if you can get here as soon as possible, that'd be really good. We can get it shifting. But
Interesting.
you can still shift it even after years down the road as
Right.
well.
Yeah. I saw that for myself.
Yeah.
And Pat too. I'm just going to go through some of the messages here, Cathy, if you're okay. So I've got Marion saying, hello, Kenda and Cathy. I lost my baby 10 days ago. Marion's just new to the group. And oh, I know, Marion.
Wow.
Pat's on here saying, hi, Kenda and Cathy. Barbara saying, hi, Kenda and Cathy. Barbara's also saying it's almost 2 years since Scooter passed. I've come to accept I'll always miss him, just like my mom and grandmother. I've overanalyzed. He's not coming back in his human form, but he's always here. I'm like Photoshop. I move the layers around, the strongest kind of love there is. Nicole from Switzerland. Yes, you're both so right. I know people that decided because they experienced a pet loss in their childhood that they will never ever have a pet again just to protect themselves. That's a sad statement, isn't it, Cathy?
Oh, that is so sad because pets give us so much, right? It's almost a self-sabotaging, but I understand you're protecting your heart.
The pain is immense, but I can't imagine the love that I would miss the love more than, yeah, it's such a balance though, right? It's such a balance. When things happen, we turn to our little guys who are there for us. We miss that. Old memories are cushions. And then Pat says, but that was the function of a poor group leader. Yeah, like with my not feeling like I fit in. And you know, I was having this conversation, Cathy, with somebody else. It might have been Pat, where we were talking about, do you remember, and I don't know if this is a US Canada difference, but when you had a funeral, when the hearse was leaving the funeral home, the rest of the funeral participants would file behind the hearse. Your lights would be on, and people would pull over to the side of the road out of a sign of respect. Do they still do that in Canada?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, not so much in the U.S.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, not so much in the U.S. So maybe it's because we're Canadian and it's we're just, you know, the way Canadians are, right? But I find, and I don't know if this is a thing or not, or maybe it's just in the area I'm in. I hate to say that because I haven't traveled the entire US to be able to make that statement. But don't you find that, like as I said, we're a grief illiterate society, and we rush through that grief. You know, your employer gives you what, 2-3 days off if you lose a parent. If you lose a pet, it's like whippy ding, get your butt into work.
Oh yeah, and it's how do we educate these workplaces, right? Maybe that could be another thing you could tackle there, Kenda, is educating the workplaces about this, because it should be known as well, right? And I had a police officer, a female, and she didn't have any kids, and she lost her little doggy, and there was some stuff going on at work as well, but she was on short-term disability because she was devastated, and it was the same thing happened. Yeah, and especially with a police person with a gun, right?
Yeah.
But she had zero support from her people. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so sad. And there's a couple of people in the group. And if you guys have any questions, even though we can't see you here, I am refreshing our Facebook page over here, so be free to ask them. But there's people in the group that they're not able to function at work, Cathy, and they've had to ask, you know, to go home. But now they're at the point where, like, if I keep asking, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job because they're just not understanding. So there's not a lot of support out there for people who are grieving, and it's something's got to change, especially with this influx of, like you said, grief that's happening in the world right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I love Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's written many books on death and dying, and
I love her too.
the one that stands out is death is for the living.
Yeah.
Right? It's for us to be able to live,
Mhm.
LIVE, really live our lives. And so if there was some way of educating the workplace, HR, for example, human resources, of her work, or there's lots of other researchers that have done tons and tons of work, and I know they're busy and there's a lot going on in the world. But it's like change is happening now in many, 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 thank goodness, ways. And maybe this is a time for some change in this as well.
Because that's got to be an ancient rule. Like, I mean, even when I was like 20 years old, which I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but I mean, even the rule back then, the federal rule was, I think it's like 2 or 3 days is all you got off for losing a parent. And
Yeah.
like, how can you be expected to, function with so little time off, and it just seems like some of our rules are so archaic for this day and age that they need to be updated, but nobody wants to update them, right? Or I don't know, I don't even know who's in charge of that. Is I guess it would be a government, right? Government official that could make a change like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much workplace have to be able to add it as an extra benefit too for their people,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, how did Kathy get involved with EMDR? What drew you to it? Because you were already a psychotherapist, so you could have kept doing what you were doing. What made you kind of veer off of the trail that you were on to look at this?
Um, well, I think the main reason I went into psychology was because I really love to understand what the brain does and doesn't do, or how it can be, um, well, now that they're saying it's neuroplasticity, where they used to think it was like set, tons of research on the past, 20 years of that. And so I always loved to learn and be educated. And I thought, there's got to be other ways to be able to shift the brain. So I think it was in 1999, I created 2 guided meditation brainwave entrainment audios. They're on my website for free right now during
Oh,
COVID.
we'll have to put your link
Yeah.
for your website down.
Okay. So the brainwave entrainment trains your brainwaves to go into the lower level of brainwave activity, which helps calm you down, right?
Yes.
There's one for sleep, so it takes you into just before the sleep brainwave activity. There's another one for anxiety and relaxation that takes you into not the sleep one. So I got interested in brainwave entrainment, and it's been around forever, but it kind of lost. Nobody was using it or knew about it. So, anyways, started with that, and then just led into EMDR and taking the training, and then led me into brain spotting. Brain spotting is an offshoot of EMDR.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know
I'll
about.
tell you this story. It's very interesting because it's Dr. David Grand in New York City was working with EMDR with a top performing athlete, and she was a skater, and she couldn't get her whatever loop, triple, whatever it's called. And so he was doing EMDR eye movements with her,
Okay.
and all of a sudden her eyes just wanted to stare at one spot. And so he said, just stare at that spot. She was attached to a brain spot. Our eyes take us to where we're feeling often. So she was staring at a brain spot, and a whole bunch of reprocessing happened in her brain. And she was then able to do her jump that she wasn't able to do before.
Nice.
Yeah. So brain spotting is being used a lot with athletes, and actors, and I use it with clients as well. So I can use both, flip flop back and forth when needed. So
So
it's
it's a
pretty
different
like,
modality than EMDR. Like it's a whole different way of, of intercepting into the brain pathways.
actually it's doing the same thing, just in a different way.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's still getting at that midbrain stuff that I talked about earlier,
Yeah.
but just in a different way. Yeah,
So how
yeah.
would you
So
know
all
what
this
to
research.
use?
Um, well, for example, I had a client this morning who I've been seeing weekly because she has a lot of anxiety for many different reasons. And we started using brain spotting, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to change it up today, and I'm going to do eye movements, EMDR, because she was really into a lot of hopelessness feelings. And so we went right into those hopelessness feelings with EMDR. And by the end of the session, she was feeling more hope,
Nice.
which was
Nice.
really good.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is neat. I've really enjoyed learning about this, and it makes me want to take on something like this myself as a class at some point. I think there's a lot of benefit to it. And just like hypnosis, I like the fact that it doesn't people don't have to come in and lay their whole life out on that platter in front of you. You need to know a little bit, but you don't need to know a lot. It's you're more focused on how do you want to feel when you leave my office today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've never been the type of therapist that wants people to stay. I often tell people, my reward is you firing me.
I know. It sucks in our professions, right? Because people are going like, so like how many times do you see a client? And I'm going, well, maybe maximum 3, 4 times, but we don't see them again because once we fix them, they're gone. It's not like they're going to come back. I mean, sometimes you'll have people that will come back with a new problem, but the majority of them, once you help them, they move on, and that's the way it should be, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's the way it should be. Um, you have written, you're an author. Tell us about the books that you've written.
My first book is called The Best Advice Your Mother Never Gave You. And I alluded to it a few minutes ago, about the perceptions and how we see the world. And this one's kind of geared towards relationships,
Oh,
um, of how we get triggered in relationships, especially couples,
okay.
and how it builds up resentment, and why there's so many divorces. So it's helping people own their stuff, understand where it's coming from. Like I said, 0 to 11, we learn these stories in our minds. So it's a how to. This is why, and this is what you can do.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then the other book is Debugging Those Bad Thoughts, and it's for children. It's animated, and it's probably anywhere from the age 6 to 10, 11, to be able to help kids realize that they're making up these stories, these perceptions, and
Yeah.
through their negative thinking patterns. And so if young kids can learn it earlier, then we're going to be way ahead of the game. Yeah.
Oh, really, really important, Cathy. Super, super important.
Thank you.
Um, thank you. Thank you for doing this. I hope you're both recording so I can watch later. You both are so giving, and I'm grateful. It's been 87 days without my girl, and the tears haven't stopped. Grief illiterate. That's spot on. XOXO. Laura, that's from Lori. And we've got Jeff from Norway. Yeah, we've got quite a few people on here. Does anybody have any questions? Because we are winding down. Do you have any final thoughts for us, Kathy? Do you have any final thoughts for people who are grieving and they're so lost right now, I like your downloads. If you don't mind, I'm going to put a link in that people can access those. And if they have any questions, obviously for you about EMDR, you're a member of this group, so they can private message you. And like you said, you're able to work virtually, so it's not like they have to travel to Ottawa to see you. So that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Do you have any advice for people that are lost in grief right now? What can you what kind of advice can you give us?
Well, I think self-compassion is something that not many people are aware of or use, or think it's feeling sorry for themselves. And so there's a fine line between accepting your feelings, acknowledging them, right? That feelings are feelings, right? They're an energy. And when we allow ourselves to have them, then sometimes they'll just fade through. Like grief is often like waves, right? One day you might get a little wave, you feel it. The next day you might get a big wave, yeah, and you feel it huge, right? Is to be able to ride the waves and know that those waves are going to get smaller and not as frequent. However, if they're not, like we talked about, after a certain amount of time, then definitely seek some assistance, professional assistance. So self-compassion is important when you're going through this. So reading about it, there's a psychologist, her name is Tara Brach, Brach, and she's written a lot about self-compassion. There's lots of other people out there as well. So not only for losses, but I think we all need to bring that into our lives and understand the difference between self-compassion and self-care. A lot of women especially think that self-care is selfish.
Yes.
I hear that all the time. Mm-hmm. The old myth stories that we were told, mm-hmm, right? So yeah, self-compassion, just to throw it into everything we're talking about.
That's great. I'll put a link to that author as well, with some of her books, because this is a group that's big on books, and links to your books as well, Cathy. Cathy, thank you. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and your information and all your resources with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm speaking for everybody on the group, and I know that they feel the same way, just giving so freely of everything that you know and that you are. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said, we're going to allow anybody, obviously, to reach out to you and ask you questions, and maybe you'll be able to help some individuals, and we can have them on here as an interview later on how their life is different now. We already had Pat, and that was awesome. You changed her life from something that was horrendous to, just being something that doesn't even bother her anymore, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels great to share information and help people. I mean, we're all here to grow and help each other. So it's part of my life purpose. So thank you very much for having me here.
You're very welcome. I thank you again, Cathy. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
You
and
too.
I will set up all the links here for everybody to download your information.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.